The parking lot was half empty when Claire arrived, which meant she was early, which meant she'd have time to sit in the car and pretend to check emails while her hands stopped shaking. The November air smelled like wet leaves and diesel from the school buses lined up near the gym, their yellow paint dulled by streetlight. She gripped the steering wheel and counted her breaths the way the therapist had taught her during the one session she could afford before the insurance ran out. 1, 2, 3. The divorce papers were still in her glove compartment, unsigned on her end because David's lawyer kept changing the custody language, and every new draft felt like a knife she had to swallow without flinching. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. Concealer under the eyes, lip gloss, hair pulled back because she hadn't washed it in 3 days, and dry shampoo only worked so many miracles. She looked fine. She looked like every other exhausted parent walking into Riverside Elementary on a Wednesday night to argue about bake sale budgets and playground equipment. That was the goal. Blend in. Don't let anyone see the crack running down the center of everything. Her phone buzzed. A text from David. Can't pick up Emma this weekend. Work thing. You'll figure it out. No question mark. Just the assumption that she would, in fact, figure it out. Because that's what she always did. She deleted the message without responding and shoved the phone into her purse. The PTA meeting was in the cafeteria. The same cafeteria where Emma ate chicken nuggets on Tuesdays and refused to sit with the other second graders because she said they were too loud. Claire walked through the double doors and was hit immediately by the smell of industrial floor cleaner and burnt coffee from the ancient machine someone had set up on a folding table. Name tags were spread out in crooked rows. She picked one up and wrote her name in blue marker, pressing too hard so the ink bled through. The tag said, "Hello, my name is," in Comic Sans, which felt like a small cruelty. Folding chairs were arranged in a semicircle facing a projector screen that hadn't been turned on yet. Claire chose a seat near the back, then changed her mind and moved closer to the middle, then panicked that the middle made her too visible and circled back to the second-to-last row. She sat down. The metal chair was cold through her jeans. She pulled out the printed agenda someone had emailed last week, something about a fundraiser for new art supplies and a vote on whether to allocate money for a part-time counselor. Her throat tightened. Emma needed a counselor. Emma had started crying every morning before school, clinging to Claire's leg in the drop-off line, asking why Daddy didn't live with them anymore, and Claire didn't know how to explain that Daddy had decided he was happier somewhere else without making it sound like abandonment, even though that's exactly what it was. Someone sat down beside her. She didn't look up. She was too busy pretending to read the agenda, even though the words were blurring together. The person shifted in their chair. The smell of laundry detergent and something faintly woody, cologne maybe, or sawdust, drifted over. Claire kept her eyes down. She could feel him there, a solid presence in her peripheral vision, and some part of her brain registered that it was a man, which was unusual because PTA meetings were usually 90% mothers and 10% fathers who showed up once a year to look involved. The meeting started. Principal Dawson stood at the front with a microphone that crackled every time she moved. She welcomed everyone and made a joke about the coffee that no one laughed at. Claire tried to focus. She tried to care about the budget spreadsheet projected onto the screen, the columns of numbers that represented field trips and art classes, and whether the music teacher would get replaced or cut entirely. But all she could think about was the fact that David's name was still on Emma's emergency contact form, and at some point she'd have to go to the office and cross it out, or add a note, or explain to the secretary that they were separated but not officially divorced yet, which meant technically he was still the father, still responsible, still allowed to make decisions about their daughter's education, even though he'd moved in with his girlfriend and hadn't shown up to a single parent-teacher conference this year. Her hands were in her lap, fingers twisted together so tightly her knuckles went white. She forced herself to relax, breathe, look normal. Someone was talking about the art supplies, how the current budget only covered construction paper and crayons, nothing for painting or sculpting, nothing that let the kids actually create. A mother in the front row stood up and said her daughter loved art, that it was the only class where she felt confident, and didn't the school owe it to these kids to give them more than the bare minimum? Claire's eyes stung. She blinked hard. Not here. Not now. She couldn't afford to break down in front of these people, most of whom she barely knew, some of whom definitely knew about the divorce because this was a small town, and gossip moved faster than the school district's internet connection. She could already hear the whispers. Poor Claire. I heard he left her for someone younger. I heard she didn't see it coming. I heard she's barely keeping it together. The man beside her moved slightly. She felt rather than saw him reach into his jacket pocket. A moment later, a tissue appeared in her line of vision, held between two fingers, offered without a word. She froze. The tissue was white, folded into a neat square, and the gesture was so quiet, so devoid of fanfare, that it took her several seconds to process what was happening. She didn't take it. She couldn't. Taking it would mean admitting that she needed it, that someone had noticed the tears she was fighting so hard to suppress. She shook her head slightly, barely a movement, and kept her eyes fixed on the projection screen, where Principal Dawson was scrolling through budget line items. The tissue stayed there. He didn't pull it back. Didn't say anything. Just held it in the space between them, patient and steady, like he was willing to wait as long as it took. The kindness of it, the sheer unbearable kindness, made her throat close up entirely. She reached out, fingers trembling, and took the tissue. She pressed it against the corner of her eye, quick and discreet, then folded it in her palm. "Thank you," she whispered, so quietly she wasn't sure he heard. He nodded once. She still hadn't looked at him directly. She didn't want to see pity in his eyes, didn't want to have to smile and pretend this was fine, that she was fine, that everything was absolutely fine. The meeting continued. Fundraiser proposals. A debate about whether to do another magazine drive or try something new like a fun run. Claire voted when she was supposed to vote, raised her hand when she was supposed to raise her hand, and tried to ignore the fact that the tissue in her palm was growing damp from her sweat. Then Principal Dawson said, "Now we need to finalize the volunteer sign-up for the Winter Carnival. We're looking for booth coordinators, setup crew, and someone to handle ticket sales. I'm going to pass around the clipboard, and please, be generous with your time. These events don't happen without parent involvement." Claire's stomach dropped. The clipboard started making its way down the rows. She'd always been the one to volunteer. She and David used to split responsibilities. He'd handle setup, she'd coordinate the bake sale, and they'd laugh about how chaotic it all was while Emma ran around with her friends, high on sugar and joy. But now there was no splitting. There was just her, alone, trying to do the work of two people while also holding down a full-time job and keeping Emma from falling apart. The clipboard reached her row. The mother in front of her signed up for 2 shifts, then turned around and handed it over with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Claire stared at the list of names. So many names. So many families who still had 2 parents, 2 incomes, 2 adults to share the load. Her vision blurred again. She couldn't sign up. She didn't have the time. But if she didn't sign up, people would notice. They'd think she didn't care, that she wasn't invested in the school community, that she was one of those parents who expected everyone else to do the work. Her hand hovered over the clipboard. The pen felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "You don't have to," a voice said beside her, low and quiet, just for her. She turned her head and finally looked at him. He was older than she'd expected, maybe mid-40s, with dark hair going silver at the temples and eyes that were kind but tired. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't doing that thing people do where they try too hard to be comforting. He was just watching her with the expression of someone who understood what it felt like to be barely holding on. She started, but her voice cracked. He reached over and took the clipboard from her hands gently and signed his own name under ticket sales. Then he passed it to the person on his other side. "You've got enough on your plate," he said. She didn't know whether to be grateful or humiliated. A tear slid down her cheek before she could stop it. She wiped it away quickly, but not quickly enough. A woman 2 rows ahead turned around, saw her face, and frowned. Claire saw the exact moment recognition flickered across the woman's features. Oh, that's Claire Morrison, the one whose husband left, the one who's falling apart. "Excuse me," Claire muttered. She stood up, legs shaky, and made her way to the side exit. The hallway was blessedly empty, Just rows of lockers and bulletin boards covered in construction paper turkeys. She leaned against the wall and pressed her palms against her eyes. Stupid. This was so stupid. She should have stayed home. She should have sent an email with some excuse about Emma being sick or work running late. Anything but this. Footsteps echoed down the hall. She looked up, expecting a teacher or janitor, but it was him, the man from the meeting. He stopped a few feet away, hands in his pockets, and didn't come closer. "Sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to overstep." "You didn't." She tried to smile, but it felt wrong on her face. This is embarrassing." "It's not." "It is." She laughed, but it came out bitter. "I came here to prove I could handle things, and instead I'm crying in a hallway like a teenager." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "My wife died 2 years ago. Brain aneurysm. She collapsed in the kitchen while making breakfast, and by the time the ambulance got there, she was already gone." His voice was steady, matter of fact, but there was a weight underneath it. "The first PTA meeting I went to after that, I had a panic attack in the parking lot. Couldn't even make it inside. So I get it." Claire stared at him. She didn't know what to say. "I'm sorry," felt inadequate. "That's terrible," felt obvious. She settled on, "That's not the same as a divorce." "No," he agreed. "But falling apart isn't a competition." Something about the way he said it, without pity, without judgment, made the knot in her chest loosen slightly. She wiped her face with the tissue he'd given her earlier, now crumpled and useless. "I don't even know your name." "Nathan." He extended a hand. "Nathan Brooks. My daughter's in 3rd grade. "Lily." "Claire Morrison. My daughter's Emma, 2nd grade." She shook his hand. His grip was warm and firm. They stood there in the fluorescent-lit hallway, two strangers bound by the universal experience of trying not to break down in public. The muffled sound of the meeting drifted through the walls, Principal Dawson's voice rising and falling, the scrape of chairs, a smattering of applause. "Do you want to go back in?" Nathan asked. Claire shook her head. "I think I've humiliated myself enough for one night." "You didn't humiliate yourself." He paused. "But if you want to leave, I'll walk you to your car. This hallway's a little creepy when it's dark." She almost said no. She almost insisted she was fine, that she could walk herself to the car, that she didn't need anyone's help. But the truth was, she was tired of pretending, tired of being strong, tired of carrying everything alone. "Okay," she said. They walked side by side through the empty school, past classrooms with construction paper jack-o'-lanterns still taped to the windows, even though Halloween was a month gone. Nathan didn't try to fill the silence with small talk, and Claire was grateful. When they reached the parking lot, he stopped beside her car and waited while she unlocked it. "Thank you," she said, "for the tissue, and for the hallway rescue." "Any time." He pulled a business card from his wallet and handed it to her. It said Brooks Carpentry with a phone number underneath. "If you ever need someone to talk to, or if you just want to sit in silence with another person who gets it, no pressure." She took the card and slipped it into her purse. "I might take you up on that." He smiled, a real smile this time, small but genuine. "Good." She got into her car and watched him walk away toward a truck parked a few rows over. The business card felt like a tiny seed of possibility in her bag. She didn't know if she'd call him. She didn't know if she was ready for any kind of connection, even a friendship. But for the first time in months, the idea of not being completely alone didn't feel terrifying. Emma was waiting at home with the babysitter, probably still awake even though it was past bedtime, probably asking 100 questions about where Mommy went and when Daddy was coming back. Claire started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, leaving the school behind. Tomorrow she'd have to deal with David's latest text, with the lawyer's emails, with the endless logistics of splitting a life in half. But tonight, for just a few minutes, she let herself sit with the memory of a quiet kindness. A tissue offered without judgment. A stranger who saw her breaking and didn't look away. The next week passed in a blur of work deadlines and Emma's meltdowns and a phone call with her lawyer that left her shaking with rage. David wanted to reduce his child support payments. He wanted to change the custody arrangement so he only had Emma every other weekend instead of every week. He wanted, as always, to take more and give less. Claire spent an entire evening crying in the bathroom while Emma watched cartoons, then pulled herself together and made macaroni and cheese for dinner like nothing had happened. She didn't call Nathan. She thought about it, pulled his card out of her purse half a dozen times and stared at the number, but she couldn't make herself dial. What would she even say? "Hi, we met at a PTA meeting and you saw me at my worst. Want to grab coffee?" It felt too vulnerable, too desperate. But then Friday afternoon, while she was picking Emma up from school, she saw him in the hallway. He was talking to a teacher outside the third-grade classroom, nodding seriously while the teacher gestured at a folder of papers. His daughter stood beside him, a small girl with dark hair in braids and her father's serious eyes. Claire stopped. Emma tugged at her hand. "Mommy, I'm hungry." "I know, baby. Just a second." Nathan looked up and their eyes met across the hallway. He said something to the teacher, then walked over with his daughter trailing behind. "Claire, hi." "Hi." She felt absurdly self-conscious, like a teenager with a crush. "How have you been?" "Good. Busy." He glanced down at his daughter. "Lily, this is Mrs. Morrison. And this must be Emma." Emma hid behind Claire's leg. Lily stared at them with solemn curiosity. "Emma's shy," Claire explained. "She takes a while to warm up." "Lily, too." Nathan smiled. "Takes after her dad." There was a pause. Claire searched for something to say, something that wouldn't sound forced or awkward. Before she could come up with anything, Lily spoke. "Is your mom okay?" she asked Emma. "My dad said she was sad." Claire's face went hot. Nathan looked mortified. "Lily, we don't talk about private things in public," he said gently. But Emma had already emerged from behind Claire's leg. "She cries sometimes," Emma said matter-of-factly, "because Daddy doesn't live with us anymore. But she says it's okay to be sad." Claire's throat tightened. She'd told Emma that during one of their late-night conversations, when Emma had climbed into her bed and asked why Mommy's eyes were always red. "It's okay to be sad, honey. Sad doesn't mean broken." Lily nodded slowly. "My mom died, so I don't have a mom anymore. But my dad says it's okay to miss her." The two girls looked at each other with the kind of understanding that only kids can have, unfiltered and honest. Nathan and Claire stood there, two adults suddenly aware of how much their children carried, how much they'd tried to shield them from and failed. "You want to have a play date?" Emma asked. Lily looked up at Nathan. "Can we?" Nathan met Claire's eyes. There was a question in his gaze, and an offer. She thought about saying no, about keeping her life compartmentalized, about not letting anyone get close enough to see the mess. But Emma was smiling for the first time in days, and Claire was so tired of saying no to everything. "Sure," Claire said. "How about tomorrow? My place." They exchanged numbers, made plans. Emma chattered the entire drive home about her new friend Lily, about how Lily's mom was in heaven and that was really sad, but Lily was still nice. Claire listened and tried not to think about the fact that she'd just agreed to let someone into the fragile bubble she'd built around her and Emma. Tried not to think about how Nathan's kindness made her feel seen in a way that was both comforting and terrifying. The play date was easier than she expected. Nathan arrived with Lily and a box of cookies from the bakery downtown, the good ones that cost too much but tasted like childhood. The girls disappeared into Emma's room almost immediately, leaving the adults in the kitchen with coffee that Claire had actually made in a real coffee maker instead of the instant kind she'd been surviving on. "Your house is nice," Nathan said, looking around at the lived-in chaos, the pile of mail on the counter, the dishes in the sink, the crayon drawing taped to the fridge. "It's a mess," Claire corrected, "but thank you for pretending." "I'm not pretending. My place looks worse." He took a sip of coffee. "Lily tried to organize my workshop last month, gave up after 10 minutes and told me I needed professional help." Claire laughed, a real laugh that surprised her. "Emma tried to do my taxes. She's 7. How'd that go? She declared that we should only pay the government in cookies. I didn't have the heart to tell her that's not how it works. They fell into an easy rhythm of conversation, trading stories about their daughters, about the absurdity of single parenthood, about the small victories and large failures that made up daily life. Nathan told her about the time Lily had gotten suspended for punching a boy who said her mom wasn't real because dead people don't exist. Claire told him about the morning Emma had refused to go to school because she was afraid Daddy wouldn't know where to find her if they moved houses. Are you moving? Nathan asked. Maybe, probably. Claire set down her mug. The house is too big for just the two of us, and there are too many memories. David and I bought it together, picked out the paint colors, planned where the furniture would go. Every room reminds me of the life we were supposed to have. I get that. Sarah and I picked out our house the week after we got married. Took us 3 years to save up for the down payment. When she died, I almost sold it. Couldn't stand walking past her office, seeing her books on the shelves, her coffee mug still in the cabinet. He paused. But then I realized Lily needed the memories. She needed to wake up in the same room where her mom used to read her bedtime stories. So we stayed. Claire felt the weight of his grief, the way it had settled into his bones and changed the architecture of his life. Do you still miss her? Every day. His voice was quiet. But it gets easier to carry, like you build up muscle for it. They sat in silence for a moment, the kind of silence that felt like understanding rather than awkwardness. From Emma's room came the sound of giggles and the thud of something falling over, followed by more giggles. I should check on them, Claire said. Probably. But neither of them moved. Finally, Nathan stood. I should get going. Lily has a soccer game tomorrow morning, and if I don't make her go to bed early, she'll be a nightmare. Thank you for coming. Claire walked him to the door. And thank you for being, I don't know, normal about everything. You don't have to thank me for that. I do, though. Most people either avoid me like divorce is contagious, or they bombard me with questions I don't know how to answer. You let me be. He smiled. That's what the tissue was for. She'd forgotten about the tissue, the gesture that had started all of this. I still have it, actually, in my purse. I don't know why I kept it. Maybe because it was the first time someone saw you and didn't try to fix you. The accuracy of that statement hit her like a physical blow. She blinked back tears for the second time in his presence, which was becoming a pattern she didn't particularly like but couldn't seem to stop. I'll call you, she said, for another play date, or just to talk, if that's okay. More than okay. The winter carnival came faster than Claire expected. Suddenly it was December, and the school was covered in paper snowflakes, and the PTA was sending frantic emails about last-minute volunteer needs. Claire had managed to avoid signing up for anything major, but Principal Dawson had cornered her in the pickup line and convinced her to help with setup on the day of the event, which was how she found herself in the school gym at 7 in the morning on a Saturday, hauling folding tables and stringing lights while Emma and Lily ran around pretending to be snow princesses. Nathan was there too, building booth frames with the kind of practiced efficiency that came from years of carpentry work. Other parents filtered in, some she recognized from the PTA meeting, some she'd never seen before. The woman who'd seen her crying that night, Jennifer, she'd learned, approached with a clipboard and a smile that was a little too bright. Claire, I'm so glad you could make it. We're setting up the face painting station over there. Could you help Karen with the chairs? Claire nodded and started moving chairs, hyper-aware of Jennifer's eyes on her. She could feel the weight of unasked questions, the curiosity barely contained. Finally, Jennifer came over and said in a low voice, How are you doing? Really? It was the kind of question that sounded like concern but felt like prying. Claire forced a smile. I'm fine. Busy, but fine. I heard about David, that he moved out. I just want you to know, if you need anything. I appreciate it, Claire cut in. But we're managing. Jennifer's smile faltered. Of course, I just meant, well, it must be hard, and I know you've been spending time with Nathan Brooks. I just hope you're being careful. Claire froze. Careful? He's a nice man, don't get me wrong, but he's also a widower with a young daughter, And you're going through a divorce. People might talk. The implication was clear. Claire felt anger rise in her chest, hot and sudden. People are already talking, she said coldly. And for the record, Nathan is my friend. That's all. I didn't mean to offend. But you did. Claire set down the chair she'd been holding. Excuse me. She walked away before Jennifer could respond, heading toward the back exit where she could breathe without feeling like every move was being scrutinized. But she didn't make it. Halfway across the gym, Emma came running over, face flushed with excitement. Mommy, look! She held up a paper snowflake she'd made. Lily helped me. Do you like it? Claire crouched down and examined the snowflake. It was lopsided and covered in too much glue. Absolutely perfect. I love it, baby. Can we hang it in my room? Of course. Emma hugged her, fierce and sudden, and Claire felt the anger drain away. This was what mattered. Not Jennifer's judgment, not David's betrayal. Just this. Her daughter's arms around her neck, the scent of school paste and childhood innocence. Nathan appeared beside them carrying a toolbox. Everything okay? Claire stood up. Yeah, just some small-town drama. He glanced toward Jennifer, who was now talking animatedly with another mother. Let me guess, someone said something. Someone's always saying something. True. He set down the toolbox. For what it's worth, I don't care what people say, and you shouldn't either. Easier said than done. I know. He paused. But you're doing great, in case no one's told you that lately. The simplicity of the compliment, the way he said it without expectation or agenda, made her chest ache. Thank you. The carnival that afternoon was chaos in the best way. Kids running between booths, parents chasing after them, volunteers scrambling to keep up with demand. Emma and Lily stuck together, moving from the ring toss to the cakewalk to the photo booth where they posed with oversized props and matching grins. Claire worked the ticket table with Nathan, selling strips of red tickets and making change from a cash box that kept jamming. It was exhausting and overwhelming and strangely wonderful. For a few hours, she wasn't the divorced mom. She wasn't the woman falling apart. She was just another parent volunteering at a school event, laughing at kids' jokes and helping tie shoelaces and handing out tickets with a smile that didn't feel forced. Toward the end of the carnival, Principal Dawson announced the raffle winners over the loudspeaker. Emma's class had won a pizza party. Lily's class had won extra recess. And then, we'd also like to thank all our volunteers, especially Nathan Brooks and Claire Morrison, who went above and beyond to make this event possible. Claire felt her face flush as people turned to look at them. Nathan gave a small wave. Emma and Lily cheered. Speech? Someone called out, laughing. Nathan leaned toward Claire. You want to take this one? Absolutely not. He grinned and spoke into the borrowed microphone. Thanks. It was a team effort, and the kids did most of the work anyway. More laughter, applause, and then it was over. The carnival wound down. Parents collected their exhausted children. Volunteers started breaking down booths and sweeping up spilled popcorn. Claire found herself beside Nathan again, folding tables in comfortable silence. You survived, he said. Barely. That counts. Emma and Lily ran over, both holding matching stuffed animals they'd won at some booth. Can we have another play date? Emma asked. Please? Lily added. Nathan looked at Claire. What do you think? Claire thought about Jennifer's warning, about small-town gossip and people's expectations and all the ways she was supposed to grieve her marriage alone. Then she thought about the tissue Nathan had offered without asking questions, about the way he'd signed up for ticket sales so she didn't have to, about the fact that his friendship was the only thing that had made her feel less alone in months. I think that sounds great, she said. The weeks that followed were the best Claire had had in a long time. She and Nathan fell into a rhythm, playdates on weekends, coffee on weekday mornings after school drop-off, text messages sharing articles about parenting or complaining about PTA politics. Emma and Lily became inseparable. And slowly, carefully, Claire started to feel like a person again instead of just a collection of broken pieces. The divorce papers finally got signed in January. David showed up at mediation with his lawyer and his new girlfriend waiting in the car, and he agreed to terms that were far less generous than Claire had hoped for, but more than she had the energy to fight for. When it was over, she sat in her car in the parking lot and called Nathan. "It's done," she said when he answered. "How do you feel?" "I don't know. Relieved? Sad? Both?" "That sounds about right. Can I come over?" "Always." She drove to his house, a modest 2-story with a workshop out back where he did his carpentry. Lily and Emma were at school. The house was quiet. Nathan made tea and they sat at his kitchen table, where a framed photo of his late wife smiled from the windowsill. "Do you ever stop feeling guilty?" Claire asked. "For moving on?" Nathan was quiet for a long time. "I don't think I've moved on. I think I've just learned to live with the grief. It's part of me now, like a scar. But that doesn't mean I can't also be happy. What if people judge you for it? They will. They already do." He reached across the table and took her hand. "But here's what I learned when Sarah died. People are going to judge no matter what you do. They'll say you're grieving too much or not enough. They'll say you're moving too fast or staying stuck. You can't control that. All you can control is whether you let their judgment stop you from living." Claire looked at their joined hands. His grip was steady and warm, an anchor in the storm she'd been navigating alone for so long. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of what?" "Of messing this up, whatever this is." "It's friendship," Nathan said gently. "And maybe someday it'll be more. But right now, it's 2 people who understand what it's like to lose something and survive. That's enough." She squeezed his hand. "When did you get so wise?" "Trial and error. Mostly error." They sat there in his kitchen, holding hands across the table, while January sunlight filtered through the window and the world outside kept turning. It wasn't a grand romantic gesture. It wasn't a dramatic declaration. It was just 2 people finding each other in the aftermath of loss, building something new from the rubble of what had been. A month later, Claire and Emma moved into a smaller house across town. Nathan and Lily helped them unpack. Emma picked out paint colors for her new room, purple and teal, a combination that made Claire's head hurt but made her daughter beam with joy. Lily declared it the best room ever and asked if she could have her room painted the same way. Spring came. The school year wound toward its end. Emma stopped asking when Daddy was coming back and started talking about summer camp and swimming lessons. Claire got a promotion at work. Nathan finished a big carpentry project that he'd been stressed about for months, and somewhere in the middle of all that ordinary life, they stopped being just friends who understood each other's pain and became something more. It happened gradually. A hand on the small of her back while they walked through the farmer's market. A goodnight text that turned into an hour-long conversation. A moment at school pickup where their eyes met and held, and Claire realized she was falling for him in the slow, careful way of someone who'd already been broken and was learning to trust again. The first time he kissed her was on a Tuesday evening in May. They'd just dropped the girls off at dance class and had an hour to kill. They got coffee and sat on a bench near the park, watching joggers and dog walkers pass by. The conversation lulled. Nathan turned to her and said, "I need to tell you something." Claire's heart jumped. "Okay. I think I'm falling in love with you. And I know that's complicated. And I know we said we were just friends. But I can't keep pretending I don't feel this way." He took a breath. "If you don't feel the same, that's okay. I'll understand. But I needed you to know." She looked at him, this man who'd seen her at her worst and stayed, who'd offered her a tissue in silence, who'd built a friendship with her based on honesty and patience and the shared understanding of survival. "I feel the same," she said. He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his whole face. Then he leaned in and kissed her, gentle and certain, and Claire felt something inside her that had been clenched tight for months finally relax. They didn't rush. They took their time, navigating the complexities of blending their lives while keeping their daughter's needs front and center. There were hard days, days when Emma asked why Daddy didn't love them anymore, days when Lily cried because she missed her mom, days when Claire and Nathan argued about stupid things because they were both exhausted and overwhelmed. But there were more good days. Days when the four of them went to the beach and built sandcastles. Days when Nathan cooked dinner while Claire helped with homework. Days when they all piled onto the couch and watched movies, Emma and Lily curled up between them like bookends. The next PTA meeting was in September, the start of a new school year. Claire walked into the cafeteria with Nathan beside her, no longer hiding, no longer ashamed. Emma was in 3rd grade now. Lily was in 4th. They sat together in the same row where they'd first met, and when Principal Dawson started talking about fundraisers and budget votes, Claire actually paid attention. Halfway through the meeting, she felt Nathan's hand slip into hers under the table. She squeezed back. No tissues needed this time. Just the quiet certainty of someone who knew her story and chose to stay anyway. After the meeting, they walked to the parking lot together, the girls running ahead, already planning their next adventure. Claire stopped beside her car and turned to Nathan. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For seeing me, that night in the cafeteria. You could have ignored it. Most people would have. But you didn't." He pulled her close and kissed her forehead. "I'm glad I didn't." They stood there in the glow of the streetlights, two imperfect people building something real from the ruins of their past. It wasn't the life Claire had planned. It wasn't the fairy tale she'd imagined. But it was hers, and it was honest. And it was full of the kind of love that only comes from surviving the worst and choosing to hope anyway. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt seen in your darkest moment, or needed a reminder that survival is its own kind of strength, consider subscribing. Because we all deserve to know we're not alone in the messy, beautiful work of rebuilding. And sometimes all it takes is one small gesture, a tissue offered in silence, to remind us that we're worthy of kindness, even when we're falling apart. Thank you for being here.